go ahead and get started. As I said, my name is Jessie Moore. I am the Family Consumer Science Agent with the University of Georgia Extension Service, and we're going to talk about vegetarian cooking. Some of you guys may be used to vegetarian cooking. This may be something new to you, or it may be something that you've done all along. So we're going to share some tips and tricks for ways that you can make this maybe a little easier, a little less time consuming. All right, today we're going to actually start by identifying what a vegetarian is. You may have read or heard about different types of vegetarians, and there are several. So we're going to review some of those, what those definitions mean, just to give you a little idea of what we're talking about when we talk about vegetarianism. We're going to talk about if it fits in a healthy diet or not. We'll hopefully dispel any of those myths. We'll talk about making sure you're getting the right intake of certain nutrients, including protein. We'll talk about meat alternatives. We'll also share some cooking tips on cooking with vegetables, strictly with vegetables. And then, of course, share recipes, just like in other parts of the series. So first, when we talk about a vegetarian is a person who does not eat meat, sometimes other animal products, including eggs and dairy, for moral, religious, or even health reasons. So maybe something that you yourself or your doctor have recommended for you to do, or it just maybe a taste preference for you. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about vegetarian. Within vegetarianism, there are several different types of vegetarians. There are lacto-ovo-vegetarians, lacto-vegetarians, ovo-vegetarians, pescatarians, and even vegans. We're going to go through a little bit about what we're talking about. Overall, it really doesn't matter what you identify with, although if someone tells you that they are a pescatarian or a lacto-ovo-vegetarian, this may better help you understand what they do or do not eat. Okay. So lacto-ovo-vegetarian is what a lot of us commonly think of as vegetarians. Their diets exclude meat, fish, and poultry, but do include both eggs and dairy products. So you see this nice omelet here with eggs and cheese and vegetables. So that's what is considered a lacto-ovo-vegetarian. An ovo-vegetarian just takes out the dairy products, so no cheese, butter, but does allow for eggs in the diet primarily, but most of their food choices come from vegetables, fruits and vegetables, and plant-based products. Lacto-vegetarians are kind of the opposite of that. Their diets include meat, poultry, fish, and eggs, as well as foods that contain them. Dairy products, including milk, cheese, yogurt, and butter, are included. So this is the opposite of the ovo-vegetarian. So they just limit egg products, but do have dairy products. Pescatarians, a lot of folks fall into this category where they don't eat any other animal products, including meat, poultry, beef, sometimes even dairy and eggs, but they do eat fish and seafood. So a lot of folks will fall into this category, pescatarian, where they do eat fish and seafood products. Vegans, a lot of folks will have questions about veganism, what exactly a vegan is. It seems to have become popular these days. Vegans eliminate all animal products, so including dairy, eggs, and anything that is made from any of those products. Some folks are also take veganism even a step further and do they don't purchase clothes that are sourced from animals or even other household goods that may be derived from animal products. But in general, we think about just the foods that they're consuming. So veganism they are vegetarians, but not all vegetarians are vegan. So that just hopefully gives you a little bit more information about what we're actually talking about and what vegetarianism, what food groups and what food items we're talking about. Another common term you may have heard, especially recently, we hear a lot of folks talk about plant-based diets or eating plant-based. So another way to think about this is plant-forward. In this style of eating, folks may or may not eat meat. Vegetarianism would definitely be plant-based, but you don't have to totally take away meat or animal products. It's just that there are proportionately more plant-based products in your diet as opposed to eating a diet just that's very heavily meat laden. So just a couple of terms, like I said, to kind of get your mind around what we're talking about, especially if this is something new to you, something you want to try, or just something that you've heard about and think that it might be a good choice for you. Okay. So does being vegetarian fit into a healthy diet? Well, just like with everything, any other diet or any other meal plan, like we talk about a lot is, it all kind of depends. It depends on what you're eating. We know that eating French fries and lots of heavy, high fat, high calorie foods that don't contain meat, chips, cookies, all of those are by definition vegetarian. However, we know that we're not getting all of the nutrients that we need in our diets from those foods. So it all kind of depends on what we're eating. But if we are eating a balanced diet, we can look at our myplate.gov or our dietary guidelines for Americans that will tell us what a healthy diet looks like. Many of you may be familiar with this graphic. You may remember the old food guide pyramid from many, many years ago. We used that for several years that told us what we need to get in order to have a healthy diet or healthy meal plan in order to get all of the nutrients and vitamins and minerals that we need throughout the day. Probably about 15 years ago, they changed that graphic of the pyramid to this circle plate that shows us a little bit more detail about what we might need to get into our diet, what our plate should look like, half fruits and vegetables, a quarter grains, and then a quarter protein. This just helps a little bit more visualize what we need to get in. I don't know about you guys, but I never thought pyramid when I looked down at my circle plate. So this helps to make sure that we're getting in all of the different items that we need to get in. So if you notice that, if you remember the old food guide pyramid and some of the old recommendations, it specifically talked about meat. There was the protein group was identified as the meat group. But now we've kind of broadened that out to just encompass more protein. So vegetarianism can definitely fall into my plate. And we're going to talk about alternate sources of protein other than our animal-based products. Okay, so it can fit into a healthy diet. There may be some benefits to following a vegetarian diet, including reduced intake of saturated fats that we normally get from a lot of our meats, poultry, and even seafoods, a lot of our animal-based products, even high-fat cheeses and other dairy products that may increase our fat and calorie intake. We are increasing our intake of fruits and vegetables, so lots of nutrients as well, including fiber. Those both, of course, the lower fat intake can lower our calorie intake, and the increase in fiber in our diets and vitamins and minerals can help us to promote weight management, making sure we're getting what we need in without getting too many calories in. And managing our weight can help us to prevent certain types of chronic diseases, especially cancer, heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, bone and muscle pain. We could probably sit here throughout the day and think about all of the things that just managing our weight, whether that be lowering our weight or maintaining our weight, can have positive effects on our health. Okay. There are some nutrients that may be lacking in vegetarian diets. These are things that we most commonly get from animal products, especially meats, as well as dairy products, depending on what you may exclude from your diet, whether that be eggs, whether that be meats or dairy products. There may be some nutrients that you may be lacking in your diet. And we're going to talk about in the next few slides ways that you can get those, ensure that those are in your diet. But some of those include calcium, vitamin D, vitamin B12, protein, omega-3 fatty acids, iron, zinc, and iodine. To ensure that you're getting all of the nutrients that you need in your day, of course, increase your intake of nutrient-dense foods, so including fruits and vegetables that have all of the vitamins and minerals that we need. Trying to find substitutes. We're going to talk about what some of those substitutes may be here in just a minute. Trying new foods, especially ethnic cuisines, so Italian, Mexican, Indian foods tend to have dishes that are made primarily of vegetables, not quite so meat heavy that we have here in America. So that can be a great way to add new flavors, but also ensure that you're getting a variety of foods and all the nutrients that you need. Before taking any supplements, so even any vitamins or minerals, even if they're sold over the counter, we do recommend that you talk with your doctor before taking any of those. They may interfere with any conditions that you may have, chronic illnesses that you may have, or any medications that you may take. So before you take any supplements, ensure that those are safe for you and your health conditions to take. So substitutions, when we think about cooking vegetarian foods, when we think about altering our recipes in order to increase our amounts of fruits and vegetables, but also taking away some of our animal-based products, there are some ways that we can ensure we're getting in the nutrients that we need by substituting for more plant-based or more vegetarian foods. We know that calcium is an important mineral to help us with our bone structure. We know that it comes from milk and dairy foods primarily. Also dark green leafy vegetables, including turnip and collard greens, kale and broccoli. There are also calcium enriched and fortified products like cereals, juices, and even soy milk and tofu. So those can be great alternatives if you're not eating milk or dairy products. And vitamin D is another important vitamin that we want to make sure that we're getting in. We know that it's a part of cow's milk, things that are added to dairy products as well, can also be added to soy and rice milk, cereals, and even margarine. Some plant-based foods naturally have vitamin D, including mushrooms and spinach. And of course, we can get vitamin D by spending some time out in the sun. We talk a lot about avoiding sun exposure, but limited amounts, 10 to 15 minutes per day, can be beneficial to help our bodies produce vitamin D. Vitamin B12 is probably one of the most important vitamins that vegetarians may not get enough of, primarily because the major source of vitamin B12 is in animal products. So if we're cutting those out of our diet, especially meats, it can be a little more difficult to get vitamin D into our body. So it's necessary to produce red blood cells, helps give us energy, which is very important to fuel our day. There are some enriched cereals and fortified soy products that do have vitamin B12 in them. You'll just have to check the food labels. Not all cereals are fortified and not all soy products are fortified with vitamin B12, but there are some that are. Skipping on down, omega-3 fatty acids. You've probably heard of these. These are in a lot of our fish and oils, including plant-based oils, canola oil, soy oil, a lot of our nuts and seeds, so walnuts, flax seeds, and even soybeans. We can also have that fortified, meaning that they're increased in our foods, so can be added to other products as well. Iron is also found a lot in our meat products, especially red meats. So if we're eliminating those, even if you're not a vegetarian and just don't eat a lot of red meat, your iron stores may not be optimal. So including foods like dried beans or legumes. So we're talking about black beans, pinto beans, black-eyed peas, things like that. We'll ensure that we are getting our iron in. Enriched cereals, a lot of our breakfast cereals are fortified with iron or enriched with iron. Whole grain products, dark green leafy vegetables, and even some dried fruits contain more iron in them. Also, to boost the uptake of iron in our body, one thing to do is to avoid lots of caffeinated caffeinated beverages, dark sodas, teas, coffee even, and promote the uptake of iron in our body by eating or drinking vitamin C rich foods. That helps our body to absorb iron stores. So a trick if you ever have low iron, try iron rich foods with a vitamin C source. And then finally, iodine. Iodine comes a lot from things that come from the ocean, things that come from an iodine-rich environment. Iodized sea salt is a way that iodized salt is usually a way that we get a lot of our iodine in, as well as seafood and dairy products and even seaweed. So if those are things that you consume, then you may not have a problem with getting iodine in. There are some alternatives to meat products. You probably have seen a lot of these in the news or on TV recently, or even at your favorite fast food restaurant. These have become more and more popular over the last probably 5 or 6 years as folks are turning to more plant-based options, trying to find a healthier alternative to meat-based products, trying to find something that still tastes just as good as meat from a cow or chicken, and we're going to talk about those now. So meat alternatives are foods that mimic animal-based proteins in flavor, texture, and the way that we use them or usage. So some examples may be tofu crumbles. You can find those a lot of times in the frozen food section. Sometimes they'll also be marketed as soy crumbles. They are flavored to add extra flavoring, more beef flavoring to be used in place of ground beef. So it can be used in soups or stews or tacos. And a lot of folks don't even taste the difference and have a very similar texture to crumbled ground beef. Another thing that you probably have seen a lot in a lot of fast food restaurants are the Impossible Burger or the Beyond Meat burgers. Those are vegetable-based burger patties, including veggie patties. They make veggie sausages, chicken and beef out of different types of vegetables. Could be patties, could be strips like bacon, and serve very similarly to their meat-based counterparts. You can also substitute whole foods, so imitation or meat alternatives. You could substitute beans or peas for meat in soups or stews without having to use a meat alternative. The question often comes or I hear the comment that meat alternatives or meat substitutes are healthier for you because they are made from plants. Of course, I always tell folks to, take that with a grain of salt, or be sure to read food labels is very important, because if you look at a lot of those swaps, especially meat alternatives, what they do, those foods are more highly processed. So they often have higher sodium and fat content than their counterpart. They also may have added fats, not only to make them taste good, but also to help them stick together or give them the quality like we would find from beef or chicken. So there may be some additives that we don't want that may add to the fat or sodium content of those foods. So be sure to read the nutrition label, make the best decision health-wise. Of course, having some of these foods are fine in moderation, but don't always take it at face value that these foods, just because they're made from plants, are healthier for you. They may have extra ingredients that we don't want in there, mostly fats and sodium that we want to reduce in our diets. Now we're going to move into more of what you guys came for today, more of our vegetarian cooking tips. Now that we've kind of laid a little foundation of what we're talking about when we talk about vegetarianism and what we're talking about with meat substitutes and meat alternatives. So there are a couple of cooking tips or tips and tricks for you guys. As you are, if this is something that you are new to or are considering cooking more vegetarian foods, here are a couple of tips and tricks to help you get started. Just like with any other cooking technique, the first thing that we recommend is to recreate your old favorites. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Don't try to start from scratch. Take foods that you already enjoy and try adding more vegetables or finding an alternative for the meat, the animal-based protein that you may have. So those could include having a veggie pizza, substituting beans for meat in a soup or stew, or even in tacos or a quesadilla. Try to add more vegetables, so whether that be a salad or even in a soup or stew or even in a casserole, that can help bulk up a meal without adding any meat-based protein. And then, of course, finding an alternate source of protein. Those could be more of those protein-rich foods, or it could be a meat alternative. Okay. So again, try black or pinto beans in your quesadilla, try a super stew or even a chili recipe without ground beef. I think that's the age-old debate is, do you put beans in your chili? Well, with a vegetarian chili, you're all beans and no meat. So try out that and see if you or your family enjoy. Next is learn to love spices. One of the comments I've heard a lot is when we take out the meat, we take out the flavor. And in some cases you do. Meat does have a distinct flavor, especially depending on the cut and the amount of fat, say, in the meat. We do get a lot of flavor from those foods, but that doesn't mean that that's the only flavor that we can have in foods. So try adding new flavors so to help enhance your meals. Fresh or dried herbs and spices. One thing to note is that fresh herbs are generally much more voluminous in size than dried herbs, of course, so they're not interchangeable. So if you do have a recipe that calls for a half a cup or a quarter of a cup of fresh herbs, don't try to substitute that for the same amount of dried herbs. You're definitely going to use much less of the dried. It's much more potent. You don't want to knock anyone's socks off with having too many herbs or spices. Also, start out with a small amount. Start out with, a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon, especially if you're spicier spices. You may even add just a sprinkle. Things like cayenne or red pepper can add a lot of great flavor, but they can also be extra potent. And some folks may not be quite so used to the spices. So try adding in small amounts, see what you or your family enjoy, and then increase as you need to. Spices like garlic, turmeric, pepper, and nutritional yeast are also great substitutes or great things to use whether you're cooking vegetarian meals or not. You may have just heard me say the term nutritional yeast. This may be something new to a lot of folks. I know it's new to me over the last probably year or year and a half since I've started using it in my cooking, but this is a dairy-free food seasoning. It's favored for its cheesy and umami-rich flavor. So umami may be another word that, unless you watch a lot of cooking shows, you may or may not be accustomed to, but it gives us more of that savory flavor, kind of more that deep flavor that we enjoy that a lot of meats do give us. So this helps to give us that more umami flavor. Nutritional yeast is sold where you buy your spices in the spice aisle, or like flour and sugar and all of your spices. That's where it is in my grocery store here in Gainesville. You can purchase those. Usually they come in either a bag or in a canister like Parmesan cheese. It almost looks like Parmesan cheese, but it's orange, as you see, or kind of a yellowy orange color. So you can see that in the picture there, just to know what you're looking for. So again, it comes in a little shaker, or it can come in a bag. You can also purchase it online if you do your shopping online, but most grocery stores are carrying it now. It can be used as a topping for foods or mixed in to add flavor. It's low in calories, but high in flavor. So that's why a lot of folks do favor it. And it is vegetarian and even vegan. So it's dairy free. So a lot of folks enjoy that aspect of it as well. Some brands do add nutrients, B12 and iron, depending on the brand, depending on the variety that you may have, may determine what nutrients may be added to the nutritional yeast. So of course, with anything, be sure to check those food labels to see what may be in your foods and if it is going to supplement you as well. One recipe I did see, and I'm excited to try this myself at home, is that folks were using nutritional yeast as a topping for popcorn. So I'm interested to see if that tastes like the cheese spreads or the cheese flavorings that you get at the movie theater. So I'll let you know how that turns out. Another cooking tip is know the basics, know what foods to pair. For instance, having black-eyed peas may not be great in your tacos. Somebody may have a black-eyed pea taco recipe and may be willing to share it, and I'd be happy to try that out. But things like black beans or kidney beans may pair better with other foods. Know a few basic techniques. Whether that be grilling or roasting vegetables or other foods, can help open up a variety of different cooking techniques and cooking flavors. And then practice as an experiment as needed. You may practice trying adding in different flavorings or spices. You may practice different recipes or different cooking methods to see what may be the best for you and your family. Keep things on hand, stock your pantry full of vegetarian foods. Those could be beans, either dried or canned, whichever one you prefer. If you want to add your own flavorings and spices in, you may try adding your own, making those from scratch using dried beans. Or if you're just in a pinch and want something quick, you can always use the canned beans. Of course, any processed food, whether it be fresh, frozen, or canned, we do recommend checking food labels to make sure you're not getting too much added sodium or fat, things that you don't want to have, or that you're not adding extra for something that may already have those things in them. Also, frozen vegetables. I actually saw a frozen vegetable tray where you could roast it from the frozen vegetables a couple of weeks ago in the grocery store. Pastas, dried pastas, or even some of the pre-made pastas can be a great thing to have on hand and can easily be adaptable into several different recipes. And then, of course, different herbs and spices. So those could be either dried or fresh if you have the ability to have fresh. But those are great things to have on hand to whip together a quick meal. Plan ahead. A lot of folks, we know that preparing vegetables may be a little more intensive than preparing some other foods with chopping and measuring and all that fun stuff. So planning ahead can really help out. Plan your meals, prepare foods ahead, soak beans, dried beans overnight if you're making them in the traditional way in your pressure cooker. Slice, chop, and prepare vegetables for the week. So you may prepare, chop an onion for tonight's spaghetti and tomorrow night's tacos and the next night's dish as well. That can help you to cut once and eat for the rest of the week. You can also prepare grains for multiple dishes. So you may prepare rice for a taco dish and then tonight, and then an Asian dish for tomorrow night. Those can help to save you some time in the long run. Keep learning, as we talked about earlier, practice, 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 but keep learning, learn new ways to prepare vegetables, whether that be in the air fryer. It seems like every day I see a new gadget or kitchen tool where you can air fry and roast and all kinds of stuff. I think it's short of chopping the vegetable for you, it will pretty much cook any food with the different cooking gadgets that I see out at the stores these days. So air frying seems to be something that has gotten a lot of steam over the last several years. It uses very minimal oil and heats up the food by circulating air, so that it does use a very minimal amount of oil, but can have a very similar texture to frying. An electric pressure cooker or an Instant Pot is what a lot of people will call them, but they're an electric pressure cooker. There are a lot of different brands that sell those. I know we had a great session last week on that, so refer back to that for more tips and tricks on specifically for the electric pressure cooker. And then learn the differences between roasted versus steaming. A lot of us may remember steamed vegetables from our childhood and how unappealing those were. So consider using different cooking method. Roasting is a great technique. that can help bring out some of the flavors. It gives you that roasted flavor, but can also help bring out some new flavors to your foods while keeping in a lot of those nutrients, and also keeps a lot of that crispness that we like from our vegetables instead of them being kind of a mushy steamed mess. If you like steamed vegetables, that's great, but roasting can be a good alternative for vegetables to ensure you've got lots of extra flavor. Finally, embrace new cuisines. There are some ethnic dishes that are naturally vegetarian. So, and a lot of cuisines use herbs and spices that we don't normally use. So outside of that standard salt, pepper, and garlic that most Americans use every day, you can find a lot of different herbs and spices that can help flavor your meals without adding extra salt or extra fat. So you can see here, we've got stir fries are great. They're a great way to get vegetables in, but also without adding any meat-based products. Ratatouille, if you've ever seen the Disney movie, this is what he was making there. So they're in the middle. So it's a squash or zucchini, tomato, and usually eggplant-based dish with a tomato sauce. And then, of course, soups and stews can be a great way to eat vegetarian meals as well. As we mentioned, there are some ethnic dishes that are naturally vegetarian. So pasta e fagioli, so a little Italian lesson today, but fagioli is bean in Italian. So that's pasta with beans. We've talked about ratatouille just a second ago. Falafel there in that first picture there on the right. That is a chickpea patty. So if you ever go to a restaurant and see falafel on the menu or find it in pre-made in your grocery store, that is just a bean patty or a chickpea patty. So it usually tastes very delicious. So I always encourage folks to give that a try. African peanut soup, that's a soup that uses a lot of beans and tomatoes and other vegetables, as well as peanuts and peanut butter. I'm going to share a recipe with you in the next slide that shows you a little bit more about some of those flavors and how those marry together. Some of your favorite foods, just making those vegetarian. So it could be vegetable lasagna or vegetable fried rice, or down here in this bottom picture on the right, a vegetable stir fry with noodles, eggplant parmesan, and then even vegetable curry. So that is generally an Indian dish that has a lot of spices in it. You can get it either spicy or not, but it does have some extra flavor there as well. So here's our recipe for our African peanut stew. Don't worry, don't try to write this down. You can definitely screenshot it because I'm going to show you the instructions on the next slide, but I will send you this recipe out later today so that you will have this if this is something that you would like to add to your recipe box. But if you can, I wanted to share this with you today to show you the different protein sources that you can see in this recipe. Of course, we've got the chickpeas. There's also our peanut butter, and then some recipes will call for actual peanuts. You can use those in the dish or even crushed up on top as a garnish. But those can be our sources of protein, as well as several different vegetables. Raisins, that can be a little off-putting, but I will tell you that it is a unique dish or a unique addition to this dish to kind of add a little bit more of that sweetness to a very savory dish. But this is one way that you can add some different flavors with cumin and chili powder, and even some ginger, some fresh ginger, or ground, if that's what you prefer, in order to add some of those flavors. This is a vegetarian dish, the way that it is prepared. Of course, you could add chicken or beef to it if you're not eating vegetarian, but this is vegetarian by itself. The instructions are fairly simple. It's sauteing the vegetables, adding those together, and then letting them sit for at least 4 hours on high in a crock pot, or on low for 6 to 8 hours. It's going to be a great recipe for you to try with your family. It can be something you can set before you go to work, and it's ready for you when the day is done. So I will share that with you in an email so that you can have that for you and your family later. A lot of folks are new to the vegetarian food game and may not be as well versed with cooking certain vegetarian foods as they may or may be with preparing meats. So think about cooking a steak or cooking chicken. If you've been doing that for a long time, you know how to do it. A lot of our plant-based foods are different in texture and different in the way that we may use those. One example is tofu. It's sold in a variety of different ways. Often you can find it where you're in your produce section. A lot of times, a lot of grocery stores will have a section that has meat alternatives, or like I think about dairy-free cheeses is usually in my section at my grocery store. But you often find it down here on this picture at the bottom right in kind of a block. You can then slice it as it's shown at the top, or as we mentioned earlier on the left, those are those crumbles. So those can be easily added. Those are usually found packaged in your freezer section, and they do have some additives of spices and flavorings, depending on what variety you may purchase. But tofu can come firm or soft or even silken, and we're going to talk about what some of those different methods, things that you may want to use those for in the next few slides. Soft or crumbled. We do have a recipe that uses uses those tofu crumbles. It substitutes those in the place of what we would normally put ground beef. But it is a one-pot spaghetti that you can make your own sauce, so you don't even have to have spaghetti sauce on hand. And it cooks everything in one pot. The great thing about this, if you look over at the instructions, this tells you to add everything into one pot, so you don't even have to do double the dishes that you normally would when you make spaghetti. So that's always a win in my book. With tofu, one of the things that folks don't like about the texture of it, it's even the firm tofu is still pretty soft, so it doesn't have that tough or coarse texture that a lot of our meats may have. So one of the things that they do recommend, especially with if you're going to eat tofu, you want that crispness of tofu. A lot of folks will slice it into small chunks. One thing that is recommended is to press your tofu, just like what it says, press it between paper towels with a pan or weights on top of it. Could be a large pan, could be books. If you've got a pretty sturdy or heavy cutting board, and allowing it to sit and allowing it to press out for 30 minutes to up to 2 hours, depending on how large your block may have. Again, this works better for any of those foods that you want to have a crisp crust with, or kind of more tofu pieces. Silken tofu is a lot softer in texture, so it can be easily pureed into soups, stews, or casseroles. I've even heard folks put it into smoothies. Tofu really doesn't have a lot of taste, which is a great thing because you can add your own flavor to it. So therefore, a lot of folks like to add the silken tofu into things that won't add a lot of extra flavor, but that do add more of the nutrients that we get from tofu, especially with protein. Finally, firm tofu crumbles very easily, or it can hold its shape for slices. I've seen folks pan fry tofu like they would ham or a hamburger, and use that on a sandwich in the place of what we would normally put on for meat. Or it can be crumbled up and used, as we mentioned before, with those soy crumbles in the place of any ground meats that we may use. Okay. Finally, beans, peas, or legumes, especially from dried, those do require to be soaked. So the quick soaking method is to boil them for 2 to 3 minutes and then soak for an hour. You can soak them overnight as well. It just takes a little extra pre-planning to know that you want to soak those overnight. If you look at the processing times that you want to cook those beans for black beans, it's going to be 60 to 90 minutes, kidney beans, 90 to 120 minutes, and pinto beans, 90 to 120 minutes. Different beans are going to take different times, also depending on how firm or how soft you like those. So of course, the less time you process, the firmer they're going to be, and then the longer that you process those, the softer that they're going to be. So that gives you a quick look at how long it does take to prepare those beans from scratch. Using an item that may help speed those up includes an electric pressure cooker. In a lot of cases, they are not necessary to soak your beans before cooking. You can if you'd like, but it's not necessary. Place those in your pressure cooker. It does take a few minutes for that electric pressure cooker to come up to pressure and then cook, but you're greatly reducing the amount of time that you are processing those. So it goes from an hour, 1 to 2 hours to 20 to 30 minutes. And even for pinto beans can be as short as 15 minutes. You do want to make sure that you are allowing for your beans to come down from pressure. You don't want to do anything to speed up that process. Let it naturally pressure release, and that could take several minutes from that. But you have almost you've decreased the cooking time in half, if not more, by using a pressure cooker or an electric pressure cooker. Okay. All right, so in summary, vegetarian cooking can be lower fat and a lower calorie way to eat. Be aware of processed foods, just like with any additive or any foods that you're looking at. Be aware of any additives that may increase fat, sodium, and sugar content. Try new foods, new ethnic cuisines, or even new foods that you see on new recipes that you may find. Consider alternate cooking methods, including roasting, air frying, or using the electric pressure cooker. Those can sometimes save time if you're short on time. Add flavors by using herbs and spices. And try making your favorite recipes into vegetarian recipes. So try meat alternatives or substitutes that you or your family enjoy, and see if those are things that you do enjoy. Start small. Start out with one recipe. Often these days, you may hear of folks doing meatless Mondays. If this is something that you want to try one day of the week, altering your recipes. Or try one meal a day for a week and see if that will work. You may notice that you don't eat meat at every meal, so that may be easy for you. Or you may try altering the recipes that you're already making. I'm going to finish up my slides. We do have another gift card for this week for those that do fill out our survey. So we will get that. We'll have a winner for next week and get that sent out to you as soon as we get our winner. If you do have any questions, I am happy to answer any of those. My office phone number is here listed. I will tell you that I'm in and out of the office a lot, so feel free to shoot me an email. That is my email address, so I'll be happy to answer you even if I'm not in the office. I will share out I will share out our PowerPoint slides, our video that we've taken today, as well as the recipes that we've talked about, because I know that you guys are interested in those. But I'm going to let you guys finish up the chat, and then we'll see if there are any questions that you guys have. And feel free to type those in the chat if any questions, and we'll try to answer as many as we can.
Jesse, we have one question for you so far. What are your suggestions for reducing gas from beans and legumes?
Yeah, that does happen. There are a couple of different tips and tricks. A lot of the reasoning for gas is, especially if you're not used to eating a lot of beans and legumes, is the fiber content. If you're not used to eating a lot of fiber in your diet, when you eat more fiber, that creates some gastrointestinal issues. So a couple of recommendations are to slowly increase your fiber intake. So start by increasing by 1 serving. So if you're not used to eating vegetables at all, start with 1 serving at each meal this week, and then slowly build up to where you feel comfortable. Another trick that I've heard with beans specifically is to soak them. So whether you are cooking them from scratch, you're using the pressure cooker, or if you're just letting them cook low and slow for a long time, is to actually soak them and do the overnight, the long soak method can help to reduce some of the gas causing chemicals. They're not chemicals, but gas from those, the GI discomfort. So those can be a couple of different things that you may try.